Okay, so let's do share screen. Nami Mantra. Share. And who would like to do this?
I can do it, Prabhu.
Go ahead, Prabhu.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Yeah.
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Vishesha Shunyavati Pashatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyasya kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namo. Jai Shri Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. So, well, in Vancouver, they're celebrating Dashera today. So happy Dashera to everyone. In Toronto, we're celebrating tomorrow. So we'll do this again tomorrow. And okay. And any questions from last week? No? Okay. All right. So then I'll keep going and start this week's topic. So as I mentioned in my email, tonight we will talk about the pastime of Lord Krishna marrying Radharani and all the other Gopi friends of his, all in one day, all at the same time. So this refutes a lot of comments and questions that people ask. Well, why did Krishna break his promise about going back to Vrindavan? And he never did. Not true, he did. Why did Krishna never marry Radharani? Well, not true, he did. So today we'll focus on those 2 points. Excuse me. All right. So what you may recall from last week is that Lord Krishna, immediately after he killed Shalva in Dwarka, heard about Dantavakra getting ready to attack him. He also heard that Dantavakra was in Mathura. So on his chariot that could move at the speed of mind, he got to Mathura, killed Dantavakra, and then Dantavakra's brother Vidurath came to attack Lord Krishna and he killed him as well. And then he said, look, I'm already in Mathura. This is a great opportunity for me to go to Vrindavan and meet all my relatives, parents, my friends, all the residents in Vrindavan. They all love me so much. And he realized that he had really been missing all these people just as much as they had been missing him. You know, and then you may recall that Lord Balaram had visited Vrindavan. So ever since then, his desire to go to Vrindavan and see his friends and relatives there in Vrindavan had increased like literally millions of times more since that time. But when he was in Mathura, the circumstances were such that he couldn't go, although he was only 12 miles away. And then when he moved to Dwarka, there was literally absolute refusal by his parents, Vasudeva and Devaki, and other elders to let him go to Vrindavan. Why? Because they were afraid that if Krishna goes to Vrindavan, he may never return. Why? Because they loved him, they love him so much, and he loves them so much. Their pure devotion and their pure love for Krishna will basically keep Krishna in Vrindavan, and we'll never see him again. So they just would not give him permission to go. But Krishna was very, very conscious of his promise he had made to everyone in Vrindavan, especially his parents and the Gopis, that he will return. So he said, well, I have a perfect excuse and I don't need anybody's permission now. I'm already here, so I'll just cross the river and go to Vrindavan. So there's a place in Mathura. It's called Vishram Ghat. Has anybody been there, by the way?
Yes.
Yeah, so actually they say that your trip to Vrindavan, to Vrijdham, is not complete if you don't go to Vishram Ghat. So for those of you who didn't know, next time you go, please make sure go to Mathura and visit Vishram Ghat and take a bath there if possible. Anyway, so he stopped there and he took a bath in Yamuna, performed all his daily rituals, and some of the demigods showed up. They brought lots of gift items that he took and gave in charity to all the Brahmins present there. And it was there at Vishram Ghat that Krishna said, actually he vowed to himself that I will never again carry weapons on my body. And he didn't since then. And then he started for Vrindavan. But he actually got confused, what was the way from Mathura to Vrindavan? Which way should he go? He wasn't sure. So he saw somebody on the road and he asked him, excuse me, sir, can you please tell me the way to Vrindavan? And this person saw Krishna and suddenly he started exhibiting this wonderful signs of pure ecstasy on his body, just from being asked what the way of to Vrindavan is. And he couldn't respond. So Krishna got off his chariot, embraced this person and literally bathed him with his tears, and then crossed Yamuna and went to Vrindavan. Now, some of you may already know that the residents of Vrindavan, they had appointed many messengers to bring them news about Krishna. First from Mathura. Let me just mute everyone. Give me 1 second. Okay. All right. So they had appointed these messengers whose job basically was to bring news of Krishna to them in Vrindavan. So first when he was in Mathura, and then when he went to Dwarka, from there also, these messengers will keep coming on a regular basis and give them all the updates on what Krishna was up to. And they had heard about this battle between Lord Krishna and Shalva from these messengers. And they were so worried, they were so concerned that they actually stopped eating or drinking, for that matter, when they heard the details of this battle. And it says in Gopal Champu that they actually became almost lifeless. And then when Krishna came to Mathura, battling Dantavakra, because of that battle, all the traffic between Mathura and Vrindavan stopped. So there were no messages coming out from Mathura to Krishna. So they had no idea. Krishna's winning, Krishna's losing, what's happening, which was making them even more upset. And actually so upset that some of these people decided that they were going to give up their lives, either by jumping into river Yamuna or jumping into a fire. Some said, we're just going to cut our throat, with a knife. Some said, yeah, I'm going to drink some poison and kill myself. And some said that, no, I'll just go on top of the Govardhan mountain and just to jump off from there. I don't want to live anymore. I mean, that's how much upset they were because they couldn't hear what was happening in that battle with Krishna. So as you know, the more you love a person, the more you worry about it. And that's what was going on. Anyway, as they was talking like this and being very upset and feeling very upset, a priest came who brought a letter from Lord Krishna. This letter was for Nanda Maharaj. So he went to that place. There were many people sitting there, expressing their feelings and sentiments about how concerned and how worried and upset they were because they were not able to hear any news about Krishna. So they were very happy that there's a letter from Krishna. So Nanda Maharaj said to the messenger, please read it out loud, let everyone hear it. And the letter basically said that Krishna was saying to his parents that our wait is over now. First of all, please consider that I reside in this letter that you're reading, and I will be with you very, 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 very soon. You can imagine the reaction of everyone. It's like they came back to their life. And they were all shouting, Jai, 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 they're so happy. And just as they were doing that, some of them were actually dancing in joy and happiness and ecstasy. They heard Lord Krishna's conch shell. And they ran. And didn't matter what the age was, young, old, very old, didn't matter. They all ran in the direction where the sound had come from. And as soon as they saw the flag on Krishna's chariot, which was still some distance away, they were basically, stunned, and they were unable to run or move anymore. They stood there whatever spot they were at, they stood there like a statue, just staring at the flag from wherever they were. Actually, by the way, that place where they stopped and looking at the flag of Krishna's chariot, that place still there, and it's called Airav. Airav basically means he has arrived. So they were all shouting to each other, he has arrived, he has arrived, he has arrived. So the place of the village became Airav. Anyway, finally Krishna arrived. He got off his chariot, and first thing he did was he met his parents and he consoled them, and they literally embraced him and drenched him with their tears. And they embraced him again and again and again and again. They wouldn't let him go. It was like they had lost some very valuable gem and they suddenly found it after so many years. Then Mother Yashoda put Krishna on her lap. And I'm going to pause for a second and ask if anybody has any idea how old Krishna was at this time. Just take a wild guess. Even if you're wrong, that's fine. Just make a wild guess.
6 months old?
I'm sorry?
No.
6 months old?
He had
30.
already killed.
30.
30, okay?
13 or 14? 14.
Okay. 40 is a little bit warmer.
15.
17?
And sorry?
17 or 18?
Okay. Anybody for 44?
No.
That's the right answer.
44.
44.
Oh.
Okay. So 44-year-old man, Mother should have put him on her lap
Wow.
and started to kiss his forehead, kiss his cheeks, and just showering him with tears, literally. And her blouse was soaking wet with the milk because she was feeling so much affection for Krishna that all the milk was coming out. Then after a while, they settled down. Krishna got up and he offered his obeisances to all the elder cowherd men and women and gave everyone lots and lots and lots of gifts. There's clothing, ornaments, and you name it. Your jewelry, he was just giving them everyone. Anyway, just as that was going on, the cows and the calves, they came running. They came to Krishna and started smelling his body, and they started licking his body, different parts of his body. And they were mooing ecstatically. And I guess that mooing and that kissing and licking his body was their service. for Krishna and the expression of love and joy upon seeing Krishna. Now, guess what Krishna did as the cows were doing this? He offered prostrate obeisances to the cows. And when he did that, the cows bathed him with their milk and with their tears. Then Krishna got up when he hugged each and every one of them and started massaging their necks. And as he was doing that, the milk again started pouring out of their udders, making the whole place like flooded with their milk. And then other animals and birds, they came and they surrounded Krishna and they all hugged him. You can imagine how crazy the peacocks must have gone, upon seeing Krishna. The blue colored Krishna that reminds them of the clouds, and the effulgence that reminds them of lightning, and all the tears that were flowing of rain. So they thought it was actually raining. They started dancing like anything. Then another personality came, Purnamasi or Purnamasi. Anybody know who she is? Who is Purnamasi in this pastime? Okay, so first of all, I'm sorry, say something?
Who is the Yogmaya?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Purnamasi.
Yes. Purnamasi is Yogmaya. And in the pastime, she is the mother of Sundeepani Muni. And her role was to facilitate the pastimes of Krishna, and specifically pastimes of Krishna with the other gopis, again, more specifically Radharani. And she was very ably assisted by Vrinda Devi. So it was the role of Vrinda Devi and Mother Purnamasi to facilitate all these pastimes. She was very much respected in Brijdham as an elderly lady, and everybody called her Mosi. So anyway, so she came, and I guess they hadn't seen her in 33 years, which is how long Krishna had been gone. So she introduced herself. And then, of course, everybody recognized her, and they offered their obeisances to her, including Krishna. Krishna offered his obeisances as well. And she said, why doesn't everybody sit down? Sit down around Krishna. And so they did. And she said, okay, everyone feed Krishna. So they did that. And then Krishna noticed something that shocked him. He noticed that all the residents of Vrindavan were wearing old, tattered clothes, and they had no ornaments on their body. When Krishna saw that, he started crying. And with tears in his eyes, he asked Purnamasi, Mother, what is the reason for this poverty of these people? How come they're so poor they can't afford proper clothes and have no jewelry on them? So she said, my dear Krishna, whatever ornaments, whatever clothes, whatever wealth they had, they gave it away, either in charity or as oblations in the fire sacrifice, while praying for your victory against all the enemies that you were fighting. Look at the sentiments. They gave away everything. Let my Krishna win against all these demons. And she said, the only reason they kept their body alive is that they were waiting for you to return, and they did not want you to be disappointed when you came back by not finding them here. When Krishna heard that, you can imagine what he was feeling in his heart. So he called Daruk. Daruk is the charioteer. And he said something in his ears. And Daruk went to the chariot, and he brought all sorts of wonderful, very fine silk clothing and all sorts of jewelry from the chariot. Krishna at that time introduced Daruk to everyone, and he also introduced his own servants from the good old Vrindavan days to Daruk, and they all helped him bring more and more stuff from the chariot so that could be distributed as gifts to all the residents of Vrindavan. Krishna then said to his mother Yashoda, Maya, can you please bring me my old flute, my peacock feather, my stick, lakuti in Sanskrit, and my kamaria, which is my blanket, which is the dress of a cowherd boy. And he changed his appearance from that of a king to a cowherd boy. And he shed all his royal clothes and ornaments and everything else. And he just put on a simple dhoti and garlands made of wild flowers, peacock feather on his crown. And there he was, back to good old days, the cowherd boy Krishna. Then he entered Nanda Bhavan, which is the house of Nanda Maharaj, where he was welcomed with lots of singing, dancing, chanting of Vedic hymns and all that. And then he went to rest. And the funny thing happened when he went to rest, his old-time servants from his Vrindavan days, they came. And they actually had never stopped practicing how to serve Krishna for all those 33 years. So they started serving him just like they used to 33 years ago when he was in Vrindavan. Like no difference. And they were feeling that ecstasy of serving Krishna. After 33 years, you can imagine what they were feeling. Anyway, Krishna went to sleep. Next morning, he woke up and went to Mother Yashoda's residence. I should say residential quarters. It was the same house, but different quarters in the house where she was staying. And he offered her his obeisances. And there were so many other elderly ladies there. He offered them obeisances to all those ladies. And they were looking at Krishna as if they were seeing him for the first time. So much love in their eyes. And once again, Mother Yashoda took Krishna in her lap and actually started feeding him her breast milk. And while she was doing that, Krishna was literally washing her feet with his tears. He was feeling so much love as well. And then Mother Yashoda noticed that Krishna's limbs were still just as tender as they were when he was a child. And then she started thinking about all the battles he had to fight with all these demons, and she started to cry. She started to cry very loudly. So some of the ladies actually understood what was going on in her mind. So they chastised Mother Yashoda. Why are you making Krishna and the rest of us cry by crying like that? Stop thinking about all that has happened in the past and stop thinking about your separation from him. Now you are with him. He's here. He's with us. So stop all that. So of course, Mother Yashoda kind of blushed, hung her head down, and then the conversation started. Anyway, so sometime later, Krishna went excuse me, to Nanda Maharaj, who was in his own court, Darbar, as they call it. Again, he was received very affectionately by everyone there. And then Daruk noticed something, the charioteer. He noticed that Krishna is acting just like a cowherd boy. And is receiving so much love from all the residents of Vrindavan. He is enjoying this so much. He's acting like this is where he belongs. And Daruk said to himself again, no way he's coming back to Dwarka. And he got very concerned and very worried, but he became convinced that Krishna is not going back to Dwarka. Anyway, a few hours later, suddenly everybody came around and they brought with them yogurt, milk, ghee, turmeric, oil, flour, all those kind of things. And they started playing Holi, where they are throwing these items, yogurt, milk, ghee, etc., on each other. In those days, there were no sprinklers and colors that don't come off your body anymore. But this is what they would use to throw at each other, and that was their holy. So they started doing that. They started dancing ecstatically, and even Nanda Maharaj, who was very grave otherwise, joined in and started dancing like anything. Madhumangal came, he started dancing and saying, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, and he started dancing and singing praises of Krishna. Everybody started, doing the same thing. Then they stopped and they gave gifts to each other, which is another custom of Holi, by the way. Everybody gets a gift. And then Gopal Champu mentions that the funny thing was that everybody was giving gifts to each other, but these gifts were what they had just received from Krishna. So they received from Krishna, they started giving it to each other. But they're so lost. Their mind was on Krishna. They were not thinking about anything else. So basically, I was thinking, this is my thinking, that I guess that's where the concept of re-gifting started. Because as you know, a lot of people, they get a gift and they say, I don't want this. So they find somebody else, birthday, happy birthday, here's the gift. They get rid of what they don't want. Anyway, that was not the motive of these people, but that's what basically they were doing. Anyway, later on, Krishna went to the forest. Just like the old days, when he would climb up a kadam tree and start playing his flute. And with his flute, he would call the names of all the cows, all the 900,000 cows plus other cows. And by his flute, which acted like his cell phone, he would call each and every cow by their name. Dhavli, Shamli, Piti, all those kind of things. And they all came running, mooing loudly with their tail up. And they all stood in front of Krishna, and Krishna hugged each one of them individually. More than 1 million cows. Krishna hugged them all in minutes. I guess only Krishna can do that. And it's mentioned that he didn't even expand himself. It was just in that one form. He hugged them all. Anyway, after some more time, Purnamasi came. And she asked him a very interesting question. She asked Krishna, so Krishna, why have you not accepted all the gopis, and especially Radharani, as your wives? Imagine being asked by an elderly person, why haven't you married them? So Krishna was so embarrassed, he blushed like anything, and hanging his head down bashfully, he said, well, mother, you understand that the residents of Vrindavan don't see these girls as my beloveds because they're all already married. So how can I even think like that? So now it was Purnamasi's turn to hang her head down. And then she said, Krishna, it's all my fault. It's all my fault. Krishna said, what do you mean? And she said, well, all the parents of these young gopis, they wanted their daughters to get married to you. But I bewildered them into changing their mind. And I produced shadow gopis. And I put everyone in a dream-like situation where they got their daughters married to other gopas, whom they now consider as the sons-in-law. Then she said, but don't worry. I'm going to now convince everyone to get their daughters married to you if you agree. And Krishna agreed. I'm going to pause for a minute and see if there are any questions or comments. If I'm going, let me know if I'm going too fast. Is it too complicated? Too many characters? Confusing? Let me know.
Perfect speed, Prabhuji.
Okay, all right. Okay, so no comments, no questions. All right. Okay, I'll keep going. So now that Krishna understood that he was going to get married, he did the most natural thing. He asked Daruk to go to Dwarka and said, bring my toiletry and bring Lord Balaram, Mother Rohini, and Uddhav with you to Vrindavan from Dwarka. And there were 2 parrots that Lord Balaram had in Vrindavan, whom he had taken with him to Dwarka. And he said, make sure Lord Balaram brings those 2 parrots as well. So Daru complied. And like with the speed of mind, he went to Dwarka, gave them the message. With the speed of mind came back. So like in no time, he went to Dwarka and brought them all back to Vrindavan. Now, can you imagine the excitement that Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda Maiya felt when they saw Balaram and Mother Rohini? Just unbelievable. And then, of course, they loved Uddhava also. They had met him. So they were very happy to see him as well. And then what happened was everybody found out and everybody was so happy that they started inviting the whole family to their house of prasadam. So they got millions of invitations all on the same day. Okay, well, all right. Purnamasi said, okay, I got to start planning for Krishna's wedding. You know, it's not just one wedding. There's literally hundreds of millions of weddings that are going to happen concurrently, which means same time. So she met Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda Maiya. And she's very clever. So she asked Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda Maiya, oh, by the way, do you have any girl in mind that might be suitable as a bride for Krishna? And they very humbly said, my dear mother, any girl, any gopi who worshipped Mother Katyayani to obtain Krishna for her husband and is still unmarried is suitable. And then they said, if you feel there are other suitable girls, please tell us. Please tell us who they are. And of course, we will be interested in any girl that you recommend as a bride from our Krishna. So then Purnamasi said, well, how about Radharani? How about her friends like Lalita, Vishakha, etc.? When they heard that, they were shocked. What are you talking about? Mother Purnamasi, what are you talking about? They're all married already. And then Purnamasi explained how she had created these shadow gopis and got them married in a dreamlike state. And that's just not real. Don't worry about it. Well, you can imagine that Nanda Maharaj Yashoda Maiya was so thrilled to hear this news. That these girls were available. Radharani was available to marry by Krishna. And they asked Purnamasi, does Krishna know this? So she started laughing. And she said, of course he does, but he's being very shy about it. So he's not saying anything to anybody. And then they said, well, what about Radha and her Sakhis? And Purnamasi said, well, they are the ones who express their desire to me to marry Krishna. So no worries, no obstacles. And then Yashoda said, no, wait a minute. What about their parents? In their mind, they married their daughter already. And she said, well, the parents, they are so excited about the prospect of getting your Krishna as the son-in-law, they cannot stop dancing. Ever since we talked, they're continuously dancing. No sleep, no eat, nothing, just dancing. Then Nanda Yashoda said, well, what about the parents-in-law of these girls? Why will they agree to this? How will they agree to this? And Purnamasi said, don't worry, let me handle that. That's, in Hindi they say, baएं हाथ का खेल, which means I can do it with my left hand. It's so easy. And she said, don't worry, you guys worry too much. I'll take care of it. So then Nanda Maharaj, Yashoda Maiya, they were convinced. They touched her feet and they came home to start the big festivities in anticipation of the wedding. They invited all the residents of Vrindavan to these festivities. This is pre-wedding, okay? So this is not wedding yet. It's pre-wedding festivities. And they invited everybody. It's like, again, hundreds of millions of people showed up. And when that happened, Yashoda Maya sat down with Purnamasi, Mother Purnamasi, excuse me, and she sent some ladies to go and call Radharani and all her friends to come too. Well, Radharani and her friends were very shy about coming to her house, especially because they had started hearing the rumors. And of course, they had expressed their desire to do this wedding anyway from Mother Purnamasi. So they were very shy about this. But they were told, you have no choice, you have to come now. So they came. So now, when they showed up, so imagine now, literally almost all the ladies of Vrindavan are there. Now these girls show up. And then Purnamasi spoke up. And she said to all the ladies that were present and said, go to each house in Brajadham and invite the lady of that house or the ladies of the house, all of them, to this function. Don't leave anybody. So these ladies went, came back, and they all started whispering in the ear of Purnamasi. Can anybody guess what they said? It's very interesting. They went to the house to call the ladies of the house. They came back and whispered something in the ear of Purnamasi. They said, these same girls are there. In every house, one of these gopis is here, is there. All the same gopis are in their houses, individual houses. So Purnamasi said, no, you must have made a mistake. Why don't you go back again and look? So they were also kind of surprised. So they said, okay, fine. So they went back. Again, each and every house was visited by these ladies. They came back and reported back the same thing. No, we confirm. Same gopis that are sitting right here are also sitting in their own houses. It's the same, there's no difference. Well, that was, you can imagine the shock of the news. So very quickly, this news reached Nanda Maharaj. And he called everyone, all the men now, to assemble in one place. And actually, men and women. And Purnamasi invited Yogamaya. She's an expansion of Yogamaya. She invited Yogamaya to appear. So Yogamaya appeared in the sky in her 8-handed form, riding a, what's the ride for Durga Devi? Who does she ride on?
Tiger or lion? I always get confused.
Yeah, lion. That's okay. So riding on a lion, and the demigods were offering their prayers to her, and she came appeared in front of everybody, and then she spoke. She addressed everyone present, and she said, "Please, no one have any doubts. No doubts. It was I who created the shadow gopis or Maya gopis. It was the shadow gopis who were married to these gopas." And then she added, the original gopis cannot even be touched by anyone other than Krishna. And then she said, you may recall that I did the same thing with Mother Sita when Ravan came to kidnap her. She said, there are many chaste women in the world who protect their chastity by taking shelter of their duty and social customs, which basically means that they what's the word I'm looking for? They take the shelter or the support of the duty and social customs, and they use that as the reason. They use duty and social customs as the reason for the chastity. And she said, but these gopis didn't care for the duty and social customs. They actually rejected the social customs of their duties. And they served Krishna, only Krishna as his wives. Krishna is so merciful to them only because of their purity. Well, when the people heard that, they started hooting and hollering in pure ecstasy, and they wanted to hear more. Tell me more, tell me more. And she said, well, there's not much more to tell and no use repeating the same point. See it for yourself. And then she produced all the shadow gopis in that place. So now, imagine the place. There's a pair of gopis for each gopi. The real one and the shadow one. And Yogamaya said, put them together. So now there was a pairing done. So each gopi had her shadow gopi beside her. So no longer they're in crowd. They're standing in pairs. And suddenly everybody could see a difference. Before they couldn't, but they were standing side by side, they could see the difference. And the difference was, it's like an object it's very effulgent at night. But at daytime, the effulgence is dim. Okay, so I'm going to mute everyone again. Okay, so please don't unmute yourself unless you have a question or comment. Thanks. So, excuse me. Before they couldn't tell the difference between the real gopi or shadow gopi. But when they stood together, they could see the difference. The difference was like an object, like a candle, for example, might be quite effulgent at night. But same candle at daytime, high noon, has hardly any effulgence. Another example is the fireflies. At night, they're very bright. The light comes out. But daytime, you can't see them. And same thing happened. The duplicates, the shadow gopis, although they looked very beautiful on their own right, but in comparison to the original gopis, no comparison, no comparison. So everybody was convinced that, yes, what we are being told is actually correct. So Nand Maharaj said, okay, fine. Now where do we go from here? Like, what's next? So Yogamaya said, all the duplicate gopis, the shadow gopis, please return to your house of your parents. I'm sorry, I didn't say it right. She said to the shadow gopis, all of you please return to the house of your husbands. And all the original gopis, who are basically not married, return to your parents' home. Everybody was very happy to hear that. And Mahadevi or Yogamaya then instructed everyone to go home, and she also disappeared from the scene. Now, something very interesting happened. The shadow gopis went to the house of their husbands, but the original gopis, they refused to go to the house of their parents. So all the parents, just imagine the scene, all the parents are so eager to take them back so that they can get them married to Krishna. And these girls are saying, no, I'm not going. We're not going to our parents' house. And they said, why? What happened? And listen to their logic. They said, even though we just saw our duplicates, so we are convinced that our duplicates existed. They said, but we have been living in the house of another man all this time. So there's still a blemish on our character. That blemish has to be removed, and can only be removed if, just like Mother Sita, we enter fire to prove our chastity. And they said, until we do that, we don't think it's proper for us to go to our parents' house. And then every one of them took out a card. It was like a pledge card. They took it out and they showed it to their own mothers, who showed it to their husbands and said, please read it out aloud. So they started reading it loud, and every card had the same content. Basically, what it said was, this is the gopi speaking in the letter, in the card. If in this life, by speech, in our heart, by our body, in a dream or when awake. If we were unfaithful to Krishna in any of those situations or by any of those situations, then let our body burn to ashes immediately. So I want to repeat this, but it's very important. Every card written by individual gopis said the same thing. And it said, if in this life, entire life, by speech, in our heart or in our mind, by our body, in a dream or when awake, if we were unfaithful to Krishna, let our body burn to ashes immediately, right now. And of course, everyone was shocked to hear this. And they said, well, your body is not burned to ashes. That means you're fine. So we are convinced. They said, no, not good enough. So Purnamasi then meditated on Durvasa Muni, who appeared immediately. And he said, this is Durvasa Muni speaking. He said, these gopis are nobody else's wives. And he said, remember some time ago I visited Mathura? Does anybody recall that visit of Durvasa Muni? There was something very interesting had happened. Before I start telling the pastime, I want to give an opportunity if anybody remembers.
It was when Krishna told them that you feed my guru, and then all the gopis goes and they say that Krishna tells them that, but they said how to cross the river. And they said, he said that tell the river that if Krishna is brahmachari, give me way, right? And then they say this and they actually get the way to go. And then when they go and feed Muni, Durvasa Muni, and then they said, no, how can we go back now? So he said, now you go and tell the river that if Durvasa Muni didn't eat anything, give me the way. And they said they were wondering why this is Krishna, brahmachari, my goodness, can't believe it. And Durvasa, he ate everything and now he thinks he didn't eat. So then they asked Krishna, right? What is the reason?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the pastime. She said, if you remember, I came here. And at that time, these gopis asked me, who is Krishna to us? This gopis asking Durvasa Muni, who is Krishna to us? And he said, at that time, I told them that Krishna is going to be your husband. And then he turned around to the gopis and he addressed them as mother. And he said, my dear mothers, if you still want to do Agni Pariksha, which is the examination by fire, then please enter the fire of my austerities, which is never defeated. Like, you cannot fool this fire of my austerities. Anything unchaste will burn to ashes. And saying this, he walked over to a corner, a far corner of the forest, and he produced fire that was hotter than the sun. It actually burned down that place, that corner, to ashes. And then he sat down in the middle of that fire and he invited all the gopis to enter that fire. And they all did. One by one, they lined up. One by one, they entered the fire. Actually, they entered multiple times just to be sure. And just so everybody can see, nobody misses it. They entered that fire multiple times. And Krishna couldn't take it anymore. He started crying, like, what's going on? Because of me, they're entering the fire. So much pain, this and that. He started crying. But the gopis didn't stop. And finally, somebody stopped the fire and said, well, every one of you has passed. Passed with flying colors, because actually I know from my own mystic powers that every one of you actually felt a coolness in the fire, no heat. And remember, it was hotter than the sun, but they were feeling coolness as they entered the fire. And somebody said, if that's not an evidence of your chastity, I don't know what is. Everybody agreed that no further proof required. Then there was somebody asked for permission to leave and disappeared. And a great dinner party ensued right there to celebrate this occasion. Then, over the next week or so, different kinds of pre-wedding ceremonies were held. And as you know, in India, we love ceremonies, and in every ceremony, gifts are exchanged. So this was going on, like almost every day, sometimes multiple times a day, this was going on. And bride side brings gifts for the groom side, and groom side brings gifts for the bride side, and this keeps on going. And then Nanda Maharaj, Vrishbhanu, King Vrishbhanu, Mother Yashoda, Mother Kirtida, Radharani's mother, they all called a priest, actually not a priest, number of priests, the Brahmins. And they said, can you please determine the proper date and time for the wedding? So they did. It's also mentioned that at that time, they also set a date and time for Lord Balaram's wedding. Because what happened was, everybody said, well, if Krishna is getting married, Lord Balaram has a lot of gopis too. So why should they be left? So therefore, both brothers were going to get married, but not on the same day. Now, the interesting thing was, as I mentioned before, Krishna was going to marry all the gopis, hundreds of millions of them, all on the same day, at the same time. And Nanda Maharaj realized that. So he asked, hey, how is that going to be possible? How would Krishna be in hundreds of millions of places? Who will attend as a groom's party? And what happens to the invitation that everybody's getting to attend the girl's side? So everybody was scratching their head, what will happen? And Madhumangal was standing there. Madhumangal, you might recall, is a very close friend of Krishna, little chubby on the chubby side, loves laddus, and is very, like a funny guy, always cracking jokes. So he heard that question from Nanda Maharaj. And he raised his hand and said, I can answer, I can answer, I can answer. So everybody looked at him and he said, hey, what's the problem? We'll set Krishna's armor in one place, we'll set his crown in another place, we'll set his picture in another place, we'll set his stick in yet another place, and so on and so on. We'll set his flute in one place, we'll set the remnants of his bhoga in one place, and the dust of his lotus feet in another place, on and on and on. But so we baat khatam. What's the problem? Done. So Nanda Maharaj was not appreciating this. So he had this frown on his face. So Purnamasi said to Nanda Maharaj, he's just a joker, he's just joking. Don't listen to him, ignore him. Don't worry, I'll make arrangements. I'll solve that problem. Just trust me. Just relax, enjoy yourself. This is time to enjoy. Don't worry. And Nanda Maharaj said, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I appreciate that everything that's happening right now is all due to your mercy. We are fully surrendered to you. Just consider as your servants and do as you please. We got no problem. So, interestingly, Purnamasi smiled and she kind of mumbled to herself. Loud enough, but not too loud. She said, we will argue later who's the master and who's the servant. But for now, please call Krishna and Balaram for the tilak ceremony, which is one of the pre-wedding ceremonies that happens in the groom's house. And this tilak is done and gifts are exchanged and Vedic mantras happen and fire sacrifice happens and those kind of things. And of course, as I said, no ceremonies without gifts. So Nanda Maharaj, after the ceremony, gave unbelievable amount of gifts and also charity, by the way. Charity to all the Brahmins who had assembled them. He had noticed Madhumangal sitting there also. So this time he said, it's not just he who has a sense of humor. I have a sense of humor too. So he said, in a joking way, he asked Madhumangal. He said, my dear respected Brahmin, like being so sarcastic. He's a little kid. well, not little kid, he's also like 44 years old by this time, but to Maharaj, Nanda Maharaj is a little kid. Says, my dear respected Brahmin, what would you like me to give you in charity now that I've given it to everybody else? Madhumangal had a very nice sense of humor. So he replies to Nanda Maharaj. He says, my dear sir, the most valuable thing in your house is Krishna. And we already have him in our control. So what should we ask you for? And what should we collect? We got nothing else. That actually, made Nanda Maharaj quiet. He said he didn't know what to say to that. So he just walked away. And of course, then they sent gifts to the house of all the gopis, houses, I should say, of all the gopis who are going to get married to Krishna on the wedding day. Again, I'm going to pause for a minute and see if there are any questions or comments. It's still not too complicated. I'm not confusing anybody.
Prabhuji, I have a question.
Go ahead, Twinkle.
Why did Nanda Maharaj walk away from his answer?
From the?
From like the response that he gave.
Oh, the response. Oh, no. Walk away basically means he didn't know how to respond to it. Sister, like, it's just like, okay, fine, you win. I have nothing to say, Walked away, got busy with other things. Not walked away mad. He just said,
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. I'm glad you clarified. He didn't go away mad. He just said, I can't respond to that.
Okay.
Like he's grave by nature, right? Grave people have difficulty answering, responding to these kind of jokes.
Because the answer was very right, Prabhuji.
Sorry, Babu?
Answer was very right.
Answer, yeah, that's true. That's also very true. Yes.
Krishna was with them.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so now the time for the wedding was coming near. Literally, as I keep saying, hundreds of millions of gopis were going to get married at the same time to one Krishna. And by the way, this is something that had never happened before. In Dwarka, how many weddings were there at the same time?
But
Sorry?
16,108.
No, close but not right.
16,801. Okay.
No.
Something.
16,100, Prabhuji.
Yes, 16,100. Other 8 main groups were married separately different times. But 16,100 got married at the same time. But there was only 16,100. Here you're taking hundreds of millions of gopis by getting married to one Krishna at the same time. Then something else. I don't know if you realize this. Everyone in Vraja was invited to all the weddings. So everyone got basically hundreds of millions of invitation cards. And on the wedding day, they all attended all the weddings concurrently. I mean, sometimes we complain about getting double booked, triple booked, but this is hundreds of million booked. Imagine having hundreds of millions of invitations for the same date time.
Yogmaya's function.
Well, of course. And another amazing thing was that in every wedding, which means in every house, hundreds of millions of guests showed up. Now, who has a house big enough for hundreds of millions of people? Like we get kind of, in anxiety, we get 50 guests. Imagine hundreds of millions of guests, but nobody had to increase the size of their house. Somehow everybody got accommodated in their existing house. So hundreds of millions of houses having hundreds of millions of guests all at the same time, doing the same thing, getting married, getting their daughter married to Krishna. So this is Krishna's mercy, this is Yogmaya's mercy. And this Yogmaya's potency, Krishna's mercy, that everyone was able to expand himself or herself into as many forms as the number of weddings. And no one even realized that they had done so. In other words, nobody realized that they had expanded to hundreds of millions of forms. In every form, they thought this was the only form. Nobody found, they thought this is the me original. Nobody thought I'm a duplicate. Hundreds of millions of them, nobody thought I'm a duplicate. And they all thought I'm only attending one wedding. But they were all there in hundreds of millions of weddings. Now, is that confusing? It should be, but only because difficult to understand this wonderful pastime of Krishna. But in terms of story, the pastime, I hope is clear.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Now, of course, I don't have time here to describe all the hundreds of millions of weddings. We focus only on Radharani's wedding with Krishna. Okay? And I guess another reason is the Gopal Champu and Padma Puran describe in detail only one wedding. So I can't describe it anyway, even if I have time, because the description is there only for one wedding. Excuse me. Okay. So now, the day of the wedding came. And they all showed up, and as happens, the groom's party, everybody's dancing, and in the girls' side, everybody's working, getting ready to serve or to serve the what's called baratis, which is the groom side. The interesting thing was that everyone was not just dancing, but also helping with the arrangements at the same time. And even the most respected citizens were sharing, actually they were happy to share the workload with their servants, their own servants. The menial jobs were not being left just for the servants. These respected citizens were doing the menial jobs along with, hand in hand with their servants. The ladies were, of course, all dressed up. They're visiting each other's house, sharing their joy by singing and dancing and joking around and having just a great time. Of course, what they were singing was all the glories, the pastimes of Lord Krishna. They were describing his form, his qualities, his pastimes, those kind of things. And all the lyrics were filled with lines like Jai Ho, Jai Ho, Jai Ho, not Balle, Balle, Balle. It's Jai Ho, Jai Ho, Jai Ho. So once again, that the mood was this amazing ecstasy, but 100% Krishna conscious at all times. Well, okay, so now it was time for Krishna's bath. So once again, he put on the dhoti and sat down to have, the paste of oil, turmeric, and flour, etc., rubbed all over his body. So this ceremony just before the wedding party leaves for the girl's house. Now, those who were about to do the service of rubbing the paste on Krishna's body noticed that his body was so soft and so effulgent that it appeared as if he had already had it done. So for those of you who don't understand this point, that the reason why the body of the groom and body of the bride is rubbed with this paste of oil, turmeric, flour, etc., is that it's supposed to give a glow to the body and make the skin softer. That's why they do it. There's no religious significance as such. So when these people, actually I should say, they were about to do that, they said, well, his body already effulgent, already so soft. So was it already done? And they said, we don't care if it was done before or not. This is a rare, once in a lifetime opportunity to rub this paste on the body of Krishna. So we're going to do that anyway, even if it's the second time for him. So they all rubbed this paste on his body and gave him a bath, nice bath, by pouring scented water over his body, his head and his body. And then they dried him up using soft towels. And then another funny thing happened. As they were drying Krishna's body, somehow Krishna's mind went to Radharani. And he started to meditate on Radharani. And suddenly, Krishna turned into the
Radharani.
Well,
Radharani.
well, not quite Radharani because male form was there, but Lord Chaitanya, which is
Oh,
Krishna in the mood of Radharani, takes the glow of Radharani. So there was another appearance of Lord Chaitanya right there. Nobody knew that. But there was Krishna, the wonderfully blue Krishna became wonderfully golden. And what happened was these people who were rubbing, toweling him off, drying him off with the towels, they thought, oh my God, maybe we rubbed Krishna's body so very hard. His body is so soft that, oh my God, what happened, And there was this terror in their eyes. What have we done? What have we done? What happened here? But then they look at Krishna and he was smiling. Okay, all is well, all is well. So everything's okay. And
all
then
is well.
all is well. And then dressed him up with clothes that was sent as a gift by King Vrishabhanu, and then gave him a very nice, beautifully decorated seat to sit on. And Mother Yashoda called for the priests to come and start the ceremonies of the day. These ceremonies in the house of the groom. Well, similar things were going on in Barsana, where Radharani was living. But the interesting thing there was everybody already knew that Radharani's skin is already very soft. Yellow. Okay, I'll have to mute everybody again. Please, if you don't mind, keep yourself muted. Okay, all right. So Radharani's body was already so soft and yellow in color that did not even bother rubbing this paste of oil and turmeric and flour on her body. But for the sake of formality, they touched it just a little bit to her body and then gave her a bath. Now, remember, Lalita, Vishakha, and other Sakhis, Tungvidya, Sudevi, all those Sakhis, they were always with Radharani. But they're also getting married to Krishna from their own house. So Lalita, Vishakha, and other Sakhis, they were there in Radharani's house serving Radharani, but they were also present in their own homes, being prepared just like that, exactly the same way, for their own marriage to Krishna. And all the similar ceremonies were going on. It's an amazing pastime. Then, in the individual homes, Radha and Krishna were brought to a mandap where all the other appropriate rituals were performed, mantras chanted, fire sacrifice done, and then they were both taken to a nearby Lakshmi Narayan temple to offer their prayers, and then return home. Now the day of wedding is here. So just imagine now, today they get married, all hundreds and millions of them, to Krishna. But we're talking about Radharani and Krishna. They're going to get married today. So the groom's party is now ready to go to the bride's house. Now, if anybody has gotten their son married, you know how difficult it is to get the groom's party to move. They all just stand there and talk and talk and talk. Nobody wants to move. So you cannot be impolite. So the groom's father stands there with hand folded. Please move. Please, if you don't mind, let's go. We're getting late. Then they'll say, I said in Hindi, Sait chali jayegi, which means the auspicious time will pass. No, please come. It's a real challenge to get people to move. But anyway, finally they managed that. And, the musicians were playing their instruments, lots of beautifully decorated horses and elephants and chariots. They were in the procession, flags were flying and people were dancing and Brahmins were chanting the Vedic hymns. And Krishna was sitting on his chariot, which is driven by 4 horses. And you may know the names already. Sanya, Sugriv, Megh, Pushp, and Balhab. Lord Balram, Shridham, and Uddhav, they were there on their own chariots. And all the demigods, including Lord Brahma, were watching. They're witnessing the procession from up in the sky, because they were not invited. So they were watching from up in the sky. And they were showering the flowers on the procession that was going on. Now, something else that's happened very interesting. There were wives of demigods also watching. So many of them, these wives of demigods, they started singing. But some became very emotional. They couldn't sing because they got so emotional. And some of them started wishing in their heart, these are married, the wives, they started wishing in their heart that, oh, I wish it was me getting married to Krishna at this time. And some were so excited, they were attempting to jump out of the airplane to be with Krishna. But their husbands were holding on to them, for their safety. No, you're going to fall down, you're going to fall down. They're holding on to them. Some had their waist belt, kamarband, they call it in Hindi, loosened. And their husbands were holding on to this so it won't fall down to the earth. And the girls didn't realize that that's what's going on. Some of them were feeling the sideways glance or the sidelong glance, whatever term I like to use, of Krishna. And it kind of pierced their heart forever. Some were embracing Krishna with their eyes. I'm still talking about the wives of the demigods. Some were embracing Krishna with their eyes, and some actually stretched their arms and imagined that they were embracing Krishna with their arms. And they felt so honored at the privilege of actually embracing Krishna, because they were not. They didn't realize that, no, they can do whatever they want, but Krishna is only for Radha. Anyway, suddenly, as all this was going on, Madhumangal was walking with the procession, with the party, and he started to throw his stick up in the sky. So people started laughing at him. They were making fun of him. Hey, what are you doing? What are you trying to do? Why are you doing this? And he said, you guys, you don't know anything. You're so innocent. You can't see the wives of demigods. They're trying to come down from the airplanes because they want to control my friend Krishna. So I'm throwing the stick to keep them away, to make them stay in their planes. Don't bother coming down here. You're not allowed, not welcome. Just go back to the plane. That's why I'm throwing this stick. So everybody thought, this guy's so funny, what imagination he has. And they had a great laugh at the expense of Madhumangal. Anyway, even the wedding procession finally arrives at the house of the bride. So this procession also arrived at the house of Vrishabhanu. When Radharani heard all the noise, of course, the bands are playing and people are singing and people are talking and chanting and all this going on. So it's very loudy atmosphere and the lights and everything and musical instruments being played and horses are, what's the sound? What's the sound that horses make? I forgot. No.
Neighing.
Huh?
Neighing.
Neighing, thank you. Yeah, neighing, yes. The horses were neighing, elephants were making their own sounds and, it's a very noisy thing. So you can't miss it. So Radharani heard all this noise and she became very anxious to see Krishna. Of course, she can't do that. She has this whole culture of being bashful and respectful and all this kind of things. She stayed, but she was really anxious to see Krishna. In the meantime, many people from the bride's side, they surrounded Krishna just so they could be near him. And then this ceremony that's even done today is called milni. Anybody knows what milni is in a wedding?
Then both the sides are, both the relatives of both the sides, they beat each other and gives money.
Correct. So they're basically the equivalent relatives. So the brothers-in-law, the girl's brother-in-law, boy's brother-in-law, girl's uncle, boy's uncle, Mamaji, Chachaji, Nanaji, and all those kind of things. They all meet each other, equivalent. And then the girl's side person gives a gift to the boy's side person. So that milni ceremony happened. Excuse me. And then hundreds of thousands of people performed arti for Krishna. And a lot of people on Radharani's side started to praise her pious credits. What punyas she must have done to get Krishna as his wife. Sorry, as her husband. And then they also added, this is the love of the people of Barsana for Radharani. Even today, they all give preference to Radharani. That's why they say Jai Radhe, Jai Radhe. Nobody says Jai Krishna in Barsana. It's also Radha Radhe. So these people, being very proud of herself, they added and they said, well, Krishna would not be as qualified as he is if Radharani was not her beloved, his beloved. So Krishna's qualities are there because of Radharani's love for him. So that was their way of saying, hey, my girl is still more glorified than the boy. Anyway, so all this was going on, and King Vishnu came. He performed the arti of Krishna, which is the welcoming kind of thing, and then blessed him. Then he took him to the wedding mandap, which had been beautifully decorated, like amazing decorations on that mandap. Krishna was offered a seat. He sat down, and he was given as gift. There's no end to the gifts, by the way, in these ceremonies. Given gifts of clothing and ornaments, and the sacred thread as well. And then the wedding ceremony started. Oh, I should have mentioned, the Radharani was also invited to the mandap. And the first wedding ceremony was that Radharani circumambulated Krishna 7 times. And then she took a seat opposite Krishna. So the priests were there, they chanted their wedding mantras and all that. And they invited King Vrindavan to do what's now called Kanyadan, which is the giving away of the daughter. Now, Vrindavan sat down, his hands were trembling, his eyes were full of tears. He somehow managed to hold Radharani's hand, and through the tearful eyes, somehow managed to find Krishna's hand and put Radharani's hand on top of Krishna's hand. And then somebody announced, this is the auspicious time when the bride and the groom should look at each other. But of course, they were too shy to do that, so they didn't do that. The priest then instructed them to meditate on their respective Ishtadevta, which is worshipable deity. The priest didn't realize that, wait a minute, they are each other's Ishtadevta. So they don't have to meditate on somebody else, they're just going to meditate upon each other. And then some of the most intimate relatives of Radha and Krishna, they arranged for them to sit side by side and performed another ceremony called Gatbandhan, which is the tying of the knot. So you have a piece of cloth or a shawl on the shoulders of the boy, and the corner of that is tied with the corner of the sari or whatever dress the bride is wearing. That's called Gatbandhan, which is tying of the knot. So that happened. So now they're tied, can't go anywhere. And then the priest ordered them to stand up and circumambulate the fire 7 times. But so many people had gathered on the stage, it had become so crowded that Radha and Krishna were not able to maintain an appropriate distance from each other as they circumambulated. And they were actually touching each other. Of course, they didn't mind. They were actually getting great amount of pleasure from being able to touch even before the wedding ceremony is completely over. Then during this time, there's another ceremony called Kheel ceremony. Anybody familiar with that? So Kheel is like puffed flat rice. And what happens is that they take it's called in Hindi, it's called soup. I don't know what's called in English. It's made of wooden straws, and they put a lot of kheel or the puffed rice on it. And the girl's brother, in this case Sridham, takes a handful of kheel, puts it in the hands of the bride. The groom is please, can you please all mute yourself? Thank you. Yeah, so the groom stands behind the bride, puts his hands under the bride's hands, and then they both offer it to the fire. And this is done a few times. I forget how many times, but done a few times. The next ceremony was for Krishna to lift a stone by his right hand and touch it to the right foot of Radharani. which described in Gopal Champu that Krishna was so nervous that he had difficulty holding that stone because his hands were trembling so much. So that same person who 26 years ago had lifted the whole Govardhan hill on his left hand, from his left hand, not just whole hand, the tiniest finger on his left hand, for 7 days and 7 nights, he couldn't for a moment hold this little stone in his hand because they were trembling so much from his nervousness. And then he couldn't touch her foot because again, his hand was trembling so much he couldn't make it steady enough to touch her foot. Amazing. Amazing what was going on. All the ecstasy that was being felt. Well, then next ceremony was Saptapadi, where the groom and bride take 7 steps, and at each step they take some kind of a vow. So that happened. And then the next ceremony is that the groom asks the bride if she has taken darshan of Dhruvtara, which is the polar star. If she has seen the Dhruvtara. And at this time, she's supposed to look up in the sky, see it, and then answer, yes, I have seen it, or no, I have not seen it. But Radharani did not even bother looking up. She just looked at Krishna and said, yes. And then they offered their obeisances, namaskar to Nanda Maharaj, receive his blessings. And the next was Sindhu ceremony, where the vermilion powder is taken by the groom and put in the parting of the bride. So that happened. And at that time, the wedding is considered over and fun begins, the dinner party starts. So that's the wedding of Radharani and Krishna. Next morning, at an auspicious time, Nanda Maharaj asked King Vishbhanu, for permission to go home. King Vishbhanu gave them again lots and lots of gifts to Nanda Maharaj and requested his wife Kirtida to bring Radharani for the what's called Vidai ceremony, which is the goodbye. The girl now leaves the house of her parents to go to the house of her husband. Of course, everybody's crying at that time. Like I don't think I've been to a wedding where not everybody was crying. Anyway, so everybody was crying uncontrollably. And then they surrendered Radharani to Krishna. King Vishbhanu turned to his daughter Radharani and he said, actually, before he did that, so let me go back. Before he did that, he turned to Krishna and he said, my dear Krishna, my daughter Radha is now surrendered to you and she's completely dependent upon you now. So please kindly tolerate her faults again and again and again and again, simply out of your mercy. No other reason. Even though she's very intelligent, sometimes she does not act so smart. We're not sure why, but it happens. So please, I'm begging you to tolerate. Lord Krishna then offered his obeisances to his parents-in-law, Kirtida and King Vishbhanu. And then Kirtida and Vishbhanu embraced Radharani. And then they instructed her. And they said, Radha, always serve your husband and your parents-in-law to the best of your ability. Always keep them happy with your character and with your service. And then all the other elderly ladies came, they embraced Radharani and blessed her for a happy wedded life. And then Radha and Krishna got on a small chariot and proceeded home. Yashoda Maiya was there. Like in those days, women did not go to the wedding. So Yashoda Maiya was home waiting for them. So she welcomed them with an arti, which is again the custom. Right at the door, you will do the arti to welcome bride and the groom. But actually, she tried to do the arti. Her hands were also trembling so much, so hard, that she couldn't finish it. So her friends had to finish the arti for her. And then there's another ceremony that happens at the house of the groom. In Hindi, it's called Muh Dikhai, which means people come to see the face of the bride, who's who's got a veil on her head. So they have to lift the veil to see. It's only for a moment. They appreciate the beauty of the bride and they leave a gift for the bride. So now all these people start coming to see Radharani's face. Of course, they had never seen any beauty like that before, and then they gave the gift, appreciating her beauty that they had never seen before, unparalleled beauty, and then they left. A few days after his wedding, Krishna then arranged the wedding of his friends, Sri Dham, etc. And it's also mentioned in Gopal Champu that Radharani requested Purnamasi to arrange a wedding for Chandravali, her competition in the Vrindavan days. And other gopis also, and it was all done. So Radharani was not envious by nature. She arranged the weddings to happen with Krishna of other gopis as well. I'm talking about gopis who did not get married on the same day. Well, now it's all done. Now Krishna ordered Daruk, the charioteer, to bring his chariot, the special chariot, to Vrindavan. And then he requested, when the chariot showed up, he requested all the residents of Vrindavan, or Brajadham, I should say, to get on board the chariot. After everyone was seated, the chariot flew up in the sky and went past the heavenly planets, all the other planets, even Vaikuntha went into Golok Vrindavan. And there, after dropping everybody off in Golok Vrindavan, Lord Krishna went back to Dwarka, along with Lord Balaram, Mother Rohini, and Uddhav. Now, I'm going to be a few minutes over time, so please bear with me. Another interesting point is, who are Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda? Anybody knows? Who are Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda? Don't say the parents. That's not the answer I'm looking for. Who are they as a background?
They Satrupa? No?
No.
Not really.
Dasha.
So Nanda and Yashoda are eternally the parents of Krishna. They live in Golok Vrindavan. But what happened was that there were two demigods by the names of Drona and Dhara. They performed serious austerities to Lord Brahma, who appeared, asked them for benediction, and they said, we want Krishna to be our child. We want to enjoy his childhood pastimes. So he said, okay. So in their partial expansions, they merged with Nanda and Yashoda. So there were two in one personalities. So Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda, they were Nanda and Yashoda as well as Drona and Dhara. So in some places it's mentioned that Drona and Dhara went to Vaikuntha as the others were on their way to Golok Vrindavan. So I just wanted to point that out. Excuse me. Anyway, so the other thing is that Lord Krishna also stayed in his unmanifest form in Vrindavan, where he is perpetually enjoying pastimes with his intimate devotees. You all know that already, right? So basically what's happened? Krishna, in this whole pastime, in one plenary manifestation, he went to Goloka in the spiritual world. In another form, unmanifest form, he remained perpetually in Vraja, enjoying the pastimes, while invisible to the material eyes. Yet in another form, he mounted his chariot and returned alone to Dwarka. I shouldn't say alone, actually, no, alone, because the other part went to with Daruk. When he got there, people of Dwarka thought that, oh, Krishna just visited his parents after killing Dantavakra and Vidurat, and now he's back. The people of Vraja, on the other hand, couldn't understand what happened to Krishna. Why did he suddenly disappear? And they was amazed, like, what's going on? We don't understand. But see, they don't understand, they are unmanifest also. So they think they're there because they can see everything except Krishna. So they're saying, what happened? Okay, then final point. This pastime, this whole pastime is not in Srimad Bhagavatam.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons why all these people ask these questions like, well, why did Krishna break his promise and never return to Vrindavan? Well, did Krishna actually ever marry Radharani? How could he, do this with somebody who was not married to him? On and on. What they don't realize is that not just once, Krishna actually married Radharani twice. Everybody knows that?
Yes, Prabhu.
When they were like very, very young in the arms of their parents. That's when they got married. Like Lord Brahma came down to Kamivan, to get them married. So he was the priest at that time. So anyway, point is that yes, they were married. So did somebody say something? Okay. And this is all described in great detail, not just in Gopal Champu, but also in Padma Puran, in the Uttarakhanda Padma Puran. So the reason why Shukadeva Goswami did not narrate this pastime to Parikshit Maharaj is that he was concerned that Parikshit Maharaj would say, I don't get this. How is it that same Krishna who caused the residents of Braja to attain Golok Vrindavan Dham in their own bodies, that same Krishna caused the residents of Dwarka to attain such an inauspicious condition in the course of his Maushal Leela. So you all know the Maushal Leela, right? When Krishna wrapped up his pastimes from Dwarka. Everybody knows that?
Infighting, Prabhuji, infighting.
Yes, correct. Yes. So how they were cursed by the Brahmins, and then they end up fighting with each other, killing each other. Anyway, so Shukadeva was concerned that Parikshit Maharaj will say, because it's attached to the Yadavas, why was that case? So he said, better to avoid this whole thing. I don't have enough time to explain all this. That Parikshit Maharaj might think it's unfair of Krishna to do that, and I don't want at this stage for him to think things like that. Okay, that's the end. So up 6 minutes over time. Hopefully you don't mind. Any questions, comments, corrections, queries?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. I had heard here and there a little bit, but this is the first time I got the full picture from starting to end. Yeah. Thank you so much. And I just wanted to understand from you, as you told that this particular part is not there in Srimad Bhagavatam. Where is it then?
It is in Padma Puran, Uttarakhanda Padma Puran, and also in a book written by Srila Jiva Goswami called Gopal Champu.
Okay, thank you, Prabhuji.
Sure. So it's all authentic. It's all authentic, totally authentic. Anyone else? Okay, then I guess time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
It was mesmerizing. We could not believe, and how you narrated so details. Still, we could capture few things here and there, but so details, Prabhuji, so wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
So sweetly done.
Yes.
Thank you, Bhajan Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Welcome, Prabhu. Hare Bol.
Hare Bol.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, everyone. Jai.